The Vikings are well known for their seafaring and conquering ways in Europe during the Middle Ages. But did you know that they also made it to the New World hundreds of years before Columbus? That's right, the Vikings were some of the first Europeans to set foot on the North American continent. Welcome to History Insight. In this video, we will be exploring the fascinating story about the Vikings' arrival in the New World. But why were the Vikings motivated to leave their homes and embark on these risky journeys? It was partly due to their desire for adventure and their belief in the Norse gods. The Vikings were also driven by practical concerns, such as the need for resources and land. The Vikings were skilled seafarers and craftsmen, and they used their expertise to explore and settle in far-flung lands. They were not afraid to venture into the unknown and were willing to take risks in order to gain new experiences and wealth. This fearless and exploratory spirit is what led the Vikings to the Americas, where they encountered new cultures and faced challenges they had never before encountered. In the following chapters, we will delve into the details of the Vikings' journey to the New World and the lasting impact they had on the continent. The Vikings' journey to the Americas began with Eric the Red, a notorious Viking who was banished from Iceland for murder. In an effort to start fresh, Eric set out to colonize the cold and inhospitable land he had discovered while exploring the coast of Greenland. He called it Greenland to entice people to move there, and it worked. A few thousand Vikings ended up settling down in Greenland and establishing a thriving community. But Eric and the Greenland Vikings were not content to stay put and soon set their sights on exploring new lands. Eric heard about a mysterious land to the west from a merchant sailor who had been blown off course on his way from Iceland to Greenland. Eric's son, Leif Erikson, was fascinated by the story and set sail with 35 men to explore this land. This voyage marked the beginning of the Vikings' journey to the Americas and their encounters with the Native Americans or Skraelings. The Vikings' exploratory spirit and desire for adventure led them to venture into the unknown and establish a presence in a new land. Leif Erikson and his crew set sail from Greenland around 1000 AD with the goal of exploring the mysterious land to the west. After a long and perilous journey, they finally reached their destination, which is thought to be Newfoundland. Upon arriving, Leif and his crew set up camp and began to explore the area. It was here that they encountered the Skraelings, a foreign tribe that the Vikings had never seen before. According to the Vikings' accounts, the Skraelings were not friendly and were armed with weapons made of bone. Despite the tension between the two groups, Leif and his crew were able to establish some form of communication with the Skraelings. They traded goods such as iron and bronze tools in exchange for animal pelts. The Vikings were able to learn about the Skraelings' way of life and culture through these interactions. However, Leif and his crew did not stay long in the New World. After a brief visit, they headed back to Greenland, leaving behind a lasting impact on the Skraelings and the land they had explored. A few years after Leif Erikson's voyage to the New World, his brother Thorvald decided to follow in his footsteps and lead an expedition to the New World. Thorvald and his men set up camp at the same location as Leif's previous voyage and spent the winter there. In the spring, the Vikings encountered a group of Skraelings sleeping under skin-covered canoes. Thorvald and his men attacked the Skraelings, killing all but one. The surviving Skraeling ran to get reinforcements, and a battle ensued between the Vikings and the Skraelings. Thorvald lost his life in this conflict, becoming the first recorded Viking casualty in the New World. Despite the hostility between the two groups, the Vikings ended up staying in the New World for another winter before returning to Greenland. This incident marked the beginning of the Vikings' conflicts with the Skraelings, which would continue throughout their time in the New World. Thorfinn Karlsefni, a wealthy merchant with a distinguished lineage, made the next voyage to the New World a few years after Thorvald Eriksson's expedition. Thorfinn organized a much larger expedition with 3 ships and between 6,250 men and women. Upon arriving in the New World, Thorfinn and his crew encountered the Skraelings and were able to establish peaceful relations with them through trade. The Vikings even established a temporary settlement called Vinland, where they built homes and farmed the land. Upon arriving in the New World, Thorfinn and his crew encountered the Skraelings and were able to establish peaceful relations with them through trade. The Vikings even established a temporary settlement called Vinland, where they built homes and farmed the land. However, the peace between the Vikings and Skraelings was short-lived. As the Vikings began to exploit the land and resources, tensions between the two groups rose. The Skraelings, feeling threatened by the Vikings' presence, launched several attacks on the settlement. Thorfinn and his crew ultimately decided to abandon Vinland and return to Greenland, unable to sustain the settlement due to the ongoing conflicts with the Skraelings. This marked the end of the Vikings' attempts to establish a permanent settlement in the New World. Despite the Vikings' relatively brief presence in the New World, they left a lasting impact on the land and its indigenous peoples. The Vikings brought new technologies and tools with them, such as iron and bronze, which the Skraelings had not previously encountered. These new tools and technologies allowed the Skraelings to become more efficient in their hunting and farming practices. In addition, the Vikings introduced new crops and animals to the New World, such as wheat and livestock. These new introductions had both positive and negative effects on the Skraelings and the land. On one hand, the new crops and animals allowed the Skraelings to diversify their diet and increase their food production. On the other hand, the new introductions also disrupted the delicate balance of the ecosystem and led to the extinction of some native species. The Vikings' encounters with the Skraelings also had a cultural impact on both sides. The Vikings learned about the Skraelings' way of life and incorporated some of their practices into their own culture, such as the use of animal pelts for clothing and the construction of skin-covered canoes. Similarly, the Skraelings learned about the Vikings and their way of life, adopting some of their technologies and customs as well. Despite their initial success in establishing a settlement in the New World and establishing peaceful relations with the Skraelings, the Vikings ultimately abandoned their settlement and returned to Greenland. The reasons behind their disappearance from the New World are not fully understood and remain a subject of much debate and speculation. One theory is that the ongoing conflicts with the Skraelings and the depletion of resources made it difficult for the Vikings to sustain their settlement. Another theory is that the Vikings simply lost interest in the New World and decided to focus on their conquests in Europe instead. There is also the possibility that the Vikings simply did not have the manpower or resources to maintain a presence in the New World. The Vikings were primarily a seafaring people, and their expeditions to the New World were likely funded by wealthy merchants or chieftains. Without the support of these financial backers, the Vikings may have been unable to sustain their settlement in the New World. Despite the many theories, the true reason for the Vikings' disappearance from the New World remains a mystery to this day. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope you have learned something new and are inspired to continue exploring the rich history of the Vikings and their adventures in the New World. Please subscribe and drop a like. See you in the next video.